and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from Germany, specifically from the Bavarian region, the city of Andechs. This is a Helles lager, and this one's been brewed by Klosterbrauerei Andechs, and the name of the beer is Vollbier Hell. This one clocks in at 4.8% ABV. And we're going to jump into just a few things here on the label, and we're going to go a little nerdy on here because there's some interesting information about some of the German that's on the label of this beer. So for starters, the word Kloster Andechs, you'll see clearly printed on the label, Seit 1455. This is the year that this Kloster was founded, and you'll notice it on the label, it looks like a church on a mountain. That is because Klosterbrauerei Andechs is indeed a German monastic brewer. It is tied to a monastery, and this, of course, is very close to the English word cloister, clearly relating to churches. And the other thing of note you'll see up top, it says Genug für Leib und Seele. That is just German for it's enough for body and soul, which tied to a German monastic brewer totally makes sense. But what is kind of the nerd real history part we're going to go into is this interesting term on the bottle here, Vollbier. That literally means full beer. And I was thinking, I wonder if that means full-bodied. So I had to do a little research because I've never actually seen that indication. And this will take a minute, but it's actually pretty interesting. So, full beer goes back to the early 1900s when Germany was first coming up with their tax classifications that brewers had to pay based on specific gravities of the beer. So this was first established under the Kaiser's tax law in 1906, and then it was further codified during the reign of the 1930s. Don't want to say the word, you know your history, but anyway, this did effectively get abolished, but the original definition of full beer, meaning full beer, was any beer whose wort original gravity at the end of the kettle boil was between 11 and 14 degrees Plato. Then they also had a few other categories, but this covered like 90 some odd percent. Almost all of the beers that were brewed in Germany at the time were covered under this term Vollbier. And then the remaining were, let's see, Einfach beer, that's simple beer. That was gravity 2 to 5.5 degrees Plato. Schankbier, tap beer, that was 7 to 8 degrees Plato, and the last category was Starkbier, strong beer, and that was 16 or greater degrees Plato. And under this tax law, it was actually not legal for a brewer to brew in gravities that they didn't have a classification for. So you could not brew anything in the range of 5.6 to 6.9, 8.1 to 10.9, 14.1 to 15.9. So it had to fall under one of their categorizations for their tax purposes. Now this law did get overwritten and got completely redone based on modern times, and looks like roughly around 2011, at least on the information I can find, it kind of reset, and it really applies to brewers that only brew over a specific amount. The current, as of 2011, is 200,000 hectoliters or more, and the lowest tax bracket would be 5,000 hectoliters or lower. And now full beer just distinguishes it as regular beer, but it does still, of course, make up the lion's share. So it's kind of interesting. If you were wondering what that meant, sure, if you know German, full beer, easy, and it sounds very close in English to what it actually means. But the designation, no, it's not dealing with the body per se. It had to do with the original gravity at the end of the kettle boil. So a little bit of a history lesson. I thought that was very interesting. I hope that you did as well. Aside from that, yeah, I've never had this one. This is great. I love a good German beer. It's been a long time since I've had a nice German Helles lager. So we're going to pour this in our nice little pub style glass here today. Get this poured right in. Oh yeah, that is indeed looking quite Helles. Lovely, lovely, lovely looking beer right here. And we'll see how long that head sticks around, but I'm going to get right up over it for a sniff, just in case it wants to collapse on me. It does actually look reasonably creamy. Oh yeah. Oh, that smells really, really nice. So there's a lot in the aroma profile that I'm not surprised about, and I know this about most German lighter lager style beers, is they do share a lot of commonality in aroma to German Pils, their Pils counterparts. And it really does, I think, a large part come back to the Deutsches Reinheitsgebot, the German beer purity law, which dictates that they can only use water, malted barley, hops, and yeast. That is the only ingredients you're going to find in a German beer, because they can't add, say, cacao nibs or anything. So with this limited ingredient list, there's only so many tweaks and changes you can make to make all these different beer styles. So they do all tend to have kind of a similar aroma profile. Obviously, some have more starkly different profiles, such as a Hefeweizen that has that noticeable kind of clove hit on the nose. This is a Helles, so it doesn't have that yeast strain, but it does smell quite nice. So what I got out of this was just this kind of honey sweetness, a little bit of appley, and a little bit of this kind of doughiness to it. That's the big aromas. And you can smell the hops on there, and it does smell to me like this was brewed with classic traditional German noble hops. So it smells like a nice light beer. Hell is the German word, or Helles, for light. That's what it means. Not dark, that would be dunkel, and they're referring to the color. This is head. But this is a beautiful looking beer. Head settled down, but it's still got a nice little pad floating on top. So we're just going to jump right into this beer and see what it's all about. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a really nice beer, guys. That is just classic German refreshing Helles lager at its best. Wow. Okay. So this is one of the things that I really, really love about drinking a good German beer. And the thing is, it's uncomplicated in the sense of, in the American craft space, there's everything but the kitchen sink, it seems, in greater than half of the varieties of beer you're going to find on the shelf. It's either going to be bottle aged, or it's going to have, you know, cream cheese frosting thrown in it, or maraschino cherries and Belgian chocolate in the back, or something like that. Because of the Deutsches Reinheitsgebot, that doesn't happen in German beer. So it's a beer fan's beer. And I don't mean to say that beers with additives aren't. I just mean it's getting back to the simplicity of what makes beer so great, and it's brewed right. These are brewers that have been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years doing what they do, honing their craft to make the perfect examples of what it is that they do. It's just no fuss, no muss, well brewed beer of whatever the given style is, and that is exactly what this Helles lager is to me. This is great. It's very crisp. It's very refreshing. It's exactly what I expected. Sure, there's a lot of aroma characteristic that reminds me of a Pilsner, but this does not taste like a German Pilsner. It doesn't lead with the hops. It leads with this kind of malt bill, and that's kind of the driving factor under something like this. A lot of what you smell on the nose, you do get in the flavor profile. So you do get this sense of this honey sweetness, kind of bits of fresh apple, maybe even a little bit of this doughy crustiness. It's very, very nice, but it's very light and it's very refreshing. This is not a heavy beer style, and it's not supposed to be. Even though Helles is referring to the color of the beer, it's not talking about the weight of the beer. Typical Helles is not going to be super heavy, and indeed this is not. It's only 4.8% ABV, which is right in the average range in a German Helles, just as most German lagers are going to fall in that range. So, a very, very nice beer on first sip. I'm going to jump back in because I was thinking about so many things. I want to make sure I can tell you exactly about the body and the mouthfeel. We'll pick apart in detail this flavor profile, then we'll talk about the balance and the finish. On first sip, I absolutely love it. It's been a long time since I've had a clean, classic German beer, and this is a really good one. Take two. Body is medium light, feels exactly right for the ABV range and for the style. Mouthfeel is very creamy, very silky when you move it around. A little bit of resistance. It feels right for the ABV. It feels right for the style. When you swallow, there's just a slight bit of the natural bitters from the hops. We're talking maybe 5-10 IBUs. It's a subtlety. And then you get just this burst of honey sweetness, kind of suggestions of fresh ripe apple. And then you get this really nice kind of doughy, crackery, biscuity, crumb kind of effect that pops in the back. It is a classic Helles. It is the classic Helles recipe with the classic character traits I would expect to see in a German brewed Helles. And indeed, even American craft Helles lagers tend to have kind of the same formula. And really, it does come down to the yeast selection and the malt bill. That's kind of going to be the two key main components that are going to make it feel and taste like a Helles. But of course, the hop selection is also important too. This should not be overly bitter, overly hopped, and indeed this is not. This is a classic German recipe by a first time. I'm pretty sure I've never had anything from Andechs. It's really, really nice. But this is a great Helles. So in terms of balance, look, nobody really does it better than the Germans when we're talking balance on a classic beer style with no additives. And again, it comes down to the German beer purity law, the Deutsches Reinheitsgebot. There's a reason for that. It's because they have not been able to use anything else other than their mastery of the craft for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So when we're talking balance, yeah, a German beer is always going to be very well thought out and balanced exactly right. And this is no exception. The ratios of their malts, their yeast, their hops is spot on for the style. And it is just a clean beer drinking experience for a Helles lager. In terms of the finish, this is classic Helles, classic German Helles. It's not a beer style known for an extravagantly long finish, especially if it's done in a very traditional manner. It's exactly as you would expect. So this is as bog standard, middle of the road, exactly as advertised as you would expect. I absolutely love it for that. It's the simplicity of the beer style that makes it so excellent, and it's the excellence with which it's brewed that makes drinking it such a pleasure. They absolutely nailed it. I had a suspicion that would be the case, and indeed, I am glad to report I was right. So guys, I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, count my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Klosterbrauerei Andechs Vollbier Hell. This one clocked in at 4.8% ABV. They are based in Andechs, Germany, in the state of Bavaria. So this was a beer that I absolutely expected would be fantastic, and indeed, I was not disappointed. It's always a treat to jump into a new beer from a first-time German brewer. I don't believe I've ever had a beer from Andechs. If I have, it's been so long ago, I certainly don't remember it, but I do know that I've never had this Helles lager. So this was a real treat. One of those that just every time I come back to a classic German brewed beer, I'm always like, yeah, that's exactly how to do that style. And this was no exception. And again, I come back to this. It comes down to how long they've had to practice at it. You can't brew a style for hundreds of years and, you know, not get really, really good at doing that exactly right. And this was a perfect example. So jumping into the scores, don't really need to go through them top to bottom, guys, because this swept it in all categories. Indeed, this is a relatively common theme with a really well done German example of a style, and this was another perfect example. It does get a perfect 10 out of 10 in all categories. That's aroma, taste, body, mouthfeel, finish, head and retention, appearance, balance, feelings/intangibles, my subjective thoughts, and example of style for a total score of a perfect 100. Yeah, this was everything that a Helles lager should be. Down the board. It checked every box. It was an exact, perfect, right in alignment of what a Helles is. This was a perfect example of a Helles lager, and indeed, my subjective thoughts, I loved it. I loved it for that. Jumping into a good German beer is always a treat. I don't do it often enough, but every time I do, I am not disappointed. Guys, if you're a fan of Helles lagers, maybe you've only ever had American Craft Helles lagers, you've never tried the Progenitor, I highly recommend you seeking out some German Helles beers. Absolutely worth your time. This is a fantastic one. You know, that's really all more I can say about this. It was an awesome, awesome beer. If you're a fan, I highly recommend seeking this out. I got this at my local bottle shop. They are imported to the States. They're not too tricky to find. I would suggest Total Wine if you don't have a well-stocked bottle shop near you. They do carry a pretty broad selection of German beers. That would be a pretty decent place to start. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit the bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.